In the shadows of this Saturday night, a tragedy unfolded across Texan soil. Cameras in Las Vegas captured the astonishing instant when the ground began shifting beneath the feet of those present. What exactly transpired in the United States that left the entire world stunned? What you are about to witness is no ordinary natural disaster. It emerges as a possible divine warning, a signal that millions already linked to the words of Jesus regarding his return. During the night of that Saturday, a catastrophe struck the territory of Texas. Lenses recorded how the floor displaced under the people. Something devastating had just unleashed in the depths of America. This nation, admired for decades as the radiant symbol of autonomy and truthfulness, now faces raw truths about a social fabric battling against disintegration. The pillars upon which this collective was erected crack with violence. They open scars not only in the touched communities, but in the very essence of the national soul. Throughout the recent 48 hours, while headlines saturated monitors with protocol greetings, smiling faces designed for cameras, or meteorological reports on snowfalls, something substantially more grave was forming in the lands of Salt Lake City. A colossal phenomenon that arose not exclusively from fractured existences, but from a reality that literally fragmented before our eyes. It was no random or casual disintegration. These represented the alerts that Jesus marked more than 20 centuries ago, manifesting in our present. We do not speak of a solitary calamity. We confront something intensely prophetic. It is the celestial will that saturated the terrestrial depths with these terrifying components which tear and annihilate its framework. Observing superficially, the contemporary global confrontations appear as mere habitual geopolitical strategies. Yet when examined through the optic of biblical prophecies, the entire atmosphere transforms radically. What seemed exclusively political mutates into something intensely spiritual. What appeared accidental begins to reveal itself as clearly orchestrated, and suddenly we comprehend that we probably stand situated within one of the most transcendent periods that our generation has traversed in its entire existence. We do not witness merely fragmented conflicts or transitory diplomatic frictions. What unfolds before us reproduces millennial patterns. Figures that were first narrated in sacred texts now materialize in our present time. Here resides the critical element that the great majority is allowing to escape. The indicators that point toward the return of Jesus have ceased to be distant contours in the horizon. They convert into solid and palpable realities. Events perfectly perceptible for whoever possesses a gaze sharpened by spiritual understanding. The sacred writings never depict the final period as something diffuse or imprecise. They communicate through exact indicators and unequivocal marks. And precisely now, those indicators converge with a speed that proves absolutely unprecedented. Jesus proclaimed in Matthew chapter 24, verse 35, that although the heavens and the terrestrial surface may evaporate, his declarations will remain eternally unaltered. This implies that the indicators he detailed did not represent simple hypothetical probabilities. They constituted absolute truths, inevitable events that would manifest exactly as they were prophesied. One of the primordial signs that he provided was the teaching of the fig tree. An apparently elemental representation, but laden with complete centuries of prophetic interpretation within Hebrew thought. The fig tree represented Israel rooted, preserved, and nourished by divinity itself. Therefore, when Jesus indicated it, he offered no mere literary metaphor. He was revealing a prophetic cipher. When Israel returned to existence after having been scattered among foreign territories, the prophetic chronometer would initiate its march. And Israel genuinely returned, contradicting all conceivable historical logic. After approximately 2 millennia wandering in exile, a nation sprouted once more. A language was resurrected, a cultural heritage restored, a people congregated again. That instant foretold by Isaiah constituted the first great indicator, a perceptible mark destined to awaken a slumbering planet. However, that was solely the prelude. This planetary obsession does not represent a fortuitous coincidence. It is prophetic confluence. And this confluence, however spectacular it may appear, continues as only the initial indicator. Because while Israel remains in its designated prophetic position, something additional unfolds. Something considerably more spine-chilling that progresses stealthily with vigor and substantially closer to our territory. A second indicator is advancing not in remote regions, not in distant limits, but here within the nucleus of the United States. The reconstitution of Israel signaled the beginning of the descending count. But the shudder that currently touches United States territory bears the weight of what proceeds in the prophetic order. It is no longer exclusively a world panorama that prepares itself. It is a nation that previously was judged solid, protected, and impregnable, now experiencing the vibrations that the sacred texts declared would propagate through all nations as the epoch approaches its culmination. And this second indicator is not technological progress. It is not political turbulence. It is not cultural fragmentation, although all these components participate. It is something deeper, more perturbing, and immensely more significant spiritually. It is the class of indicator that compels a complete nation to examine its interior. The class that reveals cracks long neglected. The class that does not sprout from foreign conflicts, but from within its own territorial limits. And what recently happened in America could perfectly be the most clear manifestation of this second indicator that we have witnessed until this moment. Before submerging ourselves in the details that communicate on their own account, you need to capture the absolute weight of this instant. If the first indicator was the budding of the fig tree, the congregation of Israel, the convulsion of Jerusalem, then the second indicator is the impact that currently traverses our own soil. An indicator that does not communicate beginnings, but increasing velocity. Not of remote prophecy, but of present circumstance. Not of some other location, but of this precise place. And when you observe what is manifested, you will capture why so many have begun to murmur the same question. Has the second prophetic marker just erupted upon United States soil? What sprouted in Utah did not concord with the habitual scheme of events. It was not another strident dispute on a monitor, nor an additional surge of cultural disarray. It was something that you could not merely dismiss by sliding your finger. An interruption that imposed itself on the physical and tangible plane. The people perceived it before being able to assimilate it. An instant in which tranquility shattered abruptly, when the ordinary pulse of a winter day was perforated by something foretold from remote epochs. And while the reports began to drip, scattered, doubtful, almost hesitating, you could detect a deeper current circulating beneath everything. Not only fear, but identification. As if the event itself transported a murmur interwoven through it. A remembrance of expressions pronounced much before our nation even existed. Christ alerted that in the concluding stage, the shakes of deception would finally collide with the shakes of creation itself. Matthew chapter 24 communicates about signs that would perturb both the psyche and the floor beneath our feet. Lucas chapter 21 alerts that the planet would respond in manners that would force humanity to elevate its gaze instead of diverting it. For this reason, the instant that recently occurred in the United States during these last 2 days possesses such relevance. Not because it was resounding, but because it was exact. Not because it was sensationalist, but because it synchronized silently and perturbingly with the sequence that the sacred texts arrange before us. A planet that loses its dominion over truthfulness, and subsequently a convulsion that reminds us the fabric of reality is considerably more fragile than we suppose. Isaiah anticipated a day when the Almighty would rise to shake what had become desensitized. Paul spoke of a mirage that would propagate until even the evident became confused. when those two currents converged, distorted truthfulness and altered creation, the events begin to be perceived less accidental and more consequential. And the United States just experienced one of those instants. Not the complete picture yet, not but enough to agitate the atmosphere. Enough to insinuate that something more monumental is mutating silently, persistently, and now undeniably close. What happened there deserves to be observed with absolute clarity. Allow me to guide you through what has just materialized. When you observe the details, you will capture why so many call it an indication that we can no longer continue dismissing. Visualize Salt Lake City in the silent quietude of dawn, before most residences awakened, before circulation routes congested. The Wasatch Cordillera remained as a darkened contour guarding the valley. Some restless souls wandered outside, unable to explain why they felt uneasy, as if something imperceptible brushed the very limit of human perception. And subsequently, without warning, without prior vibration or alert signal, it happened. This occasion was not a noise. It was not a celestial flash. But the waters near the Great Salt Lake, waters that had remained unaltered for complete generations, metamorphosed. Those present relate that they not merely modified their tonality or consistency. It was as if the very nature of the lake transformed before their own pupils. A glow emerged from the depths, discreet, initially, later strangely alive. The flash propagated along the shore like a mobile mantle, suddenly paralyzing fishermen, travelers, early risers, and immediate response personnel. Some retreated, frightened, others advanced, more impelled by something they could not rationalize logically. And in that instant, while the glow amplified, numerous felt an impression oppressing their hearts. It was not a murmur, but a convocation. A call that penetrated deeper than language, removing conscience and memory. Those who were present manifest that it felt like a scriptural passage, suddenly breathing through the environment. Not Deuteronomy this occasion, but Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 13. My people have committed two evils. They have abandoned me, the fountain of living waters. A warning wrapped within a representation of water transforming its form. A call to remember the fountain they had deserted. As the luminosity ascended and undulated, some fell to their knees without understanding why others fled, believing the coast was about to crack. Emergency teams arrived, uncertain if facing contamination, chemical reaction, or something substantially beyond human explanation. But what shook the people most was not the glow itself. It was what it seemed to reveal. A longtime resident declared that the luminosity felt as if it scrutinized his spirit, exposing forgotten commitments and convictions long neglected. A young woman awaiting public transport testified that she perceived a weight on her chest, not fear, but conviction, forcing her to confront choices she had justified for years. Another elder who had resided near the lake since childhood manifested that the glow felt older than the basin of the Salt Lake itself, older than the mountains, almost like the instant in Genesis when divinity pronounced light into existence. The sacred writings describe such instants. Habakkuk chapter 3 verse 4 communicates about a radiance hiding power within itself, luminosity that reveals the concealed. That was the atmosphere along the edge. Not chaos, but revelation. Not panic, but exposure. And while the people remained frozen before the transforming water, the deepest truth settled upon them. Divine light does not arrive merely to astonish. It arrives to sift, to convoke, to awaken. Salt Lake City perceived exactly that. An instant when the sky pressed close enough to scrutinize every hidden place, calling hearts to return before something superior unfolds. And now, while the glow fades, but the questions persist through the valley, a quiet and obsessive thought surges in every conversation. If the waters have mutated to expose the heart, what will come next? Allow me now to guide you deeper into what unfolded along the Wasatch Front this morning, when the waters near the Great Salt Lake transformed and that unsettling radiance sprouted from beneath the surface. It was not an isolated wonder. It was part of a scheme, one upon which the scriptures have whispered much before our generation ever existed. In Psalm 114, verse 7, it instructs the earth to tremble before the presence of the Almighty, not for terror, but for identification, because when divinity approaches, even creation reacts. And that is precisely what happened through the center of Salt Lake City. As the glow over the lake intensified, reports began to flood from another location, Temple Square. There, barely minutes after the phenomenon initiated, capillary fractures appeared along the pavement. And stone paths, thin, initially later widening with a perturbing and precise slowness. Not chaotic damage, not random seismic activity, but cracks that seemed to follow an invisible line, almost as if something beneath the surface was pushing upward. Residents who witnessed it manifested that the floor felt alive, as if responding to the same spiritual pressure that sprouted from the radiant water. An elder who had been walking near the assembly hall declared that he perceived a gentle but undeniable weight, as if the earth itself was listening. And here, my friend, is where the connection deepens. Revelation chapter 8, verses 10 to 11. Communicate about a burning star, falling, turning waters bitter and shaking. The places where people dwell not simply as punishment, but as a warning and alarm sounding through creation. That the time of complacency has ended, and the call to return toward divinity has arrived. The cracks near Temple Square were not catastrophic. No building fell, no street split openly. But their synchronization the same morning that the lake waters changed has left even the most skeptical voices perturbed. It felt symbolic, intentional, almost prophetic. A young woman who had been standing outside the tabernacle when the first fissure appeared manifested it was as if the floor breathed beneath my feet. The glow in the lake was calling my attention outward, but the cracks here were calling my attention inward. Another witness, a police officer helping to guide early crowds away from the developing fractures, admitted that he perceived something he had never felt in his years of service. A sensation that this was not simply a natural event, it felt like a message. And somehow all of us were part of it. You perceive the precision of this instant. The water transforms, the floor opens, and the people tremble under a presence they cannot explain. Not chaos, not destruction, but revelation. A mirror of the same warnings in Revelation 8, where water, earth, and human conscience collide under the weight of divine intervention. And yet, all that happened today feels as only the first movement of something more monumental. Something approaching something that will not be dismissed, because if the water has mutated and the earth has cracked and the people have fallen silent before a presence superior to themselves, what signal prepares to erupt subsequently? And only after the floor had ceased to tremble and the waters across the earth had adopted their unnatural crimson tonality, something even more perturbing began to unfold. A pale radiance ascended within the atmosphere, not as solar luminosity nor lunar, but a trembling glow that seemed to breathe with the air itself. Momentarily, the witnesses thought it was nothing more than a reflection, a deception of persistent dust. But subsequently, the figure within the luminosity began to adopt form. It was not sufficiently defined to be called a person, but neither sufficiently vague to be dismissed as mist. A silhouette suspended immobile over the horizon, as if observing the planet reconcile with what had already initiated. Some fell to their knees, others gazed fixedly in silence, incapable of explaining what their eyes refused to deny. This was no ordinary illumination. It arrived without announcement, without pattern, without warning, appearing precisely after the two signs that had already shaken the nation. And in that strange and trembling light, numerous perceived the weight of an ancient truth resounding through their spirits. When creation convulses, rarely does it do so alone. Something or someone always stands behind the veil. While the radiance over the great salt lake continued pulsing against the nocturnal sky, much after the multitudes had been displaced and the routes closed, Salt Lake City fell into a strange and reverent silence. The streets surrounding Temple Square remained empty, yet the atmosphere felt unbearably full. Heavy with meaning, dense with the proximity of something substantially beyond human explanation. And subsequently, something that no one could have anticipated unfolded outside the resplendent column of luminosity emerging from the transformed waters. Figures began to appear, not mist, not visual deceptions, but clear, distinct silhouettes dressed in garments that appeared as if woven from living fire. They advanced as if emerging from the light itself, not a few, not dozens, but an overwhelming multitude, so many that it seemed the entire lakeside front had converted into a portal between dimensions. These beings did not float nor suspend themselves. They moved with intention, traversing the silent streets near Temple Square, gliding through the faint echoes where people had stood before the evacuation. It was as if the city still conserved the imprint of human fear, human guilt, human longing. And the angels touched those imprints as if touching the hearts themselves. The scriptures breathed their confirmation from afar. Luminosity shines upon the path of the upright. Psalm 97 verse 11. And now the light not only had shone, it walked. Some of the beings knelt beside the pavement cracks that had opened earlier, placing their hands upon the stones as if ministering to the earth itself. Others paused beside metal barricades where trembling citizens had leaned only minutes before. Still others touched the air itself, pressing their palms forward as if laying hands upon invisible foreheads, because in a manner invisible to human eyes, they were touching the people spiritually, directly and undeniably. And the proof arrived swiftly. Every person evacuated from the aquatic front or the Temple Square area later testified that during those same minutes, something touched them. A man manifested that he perceived a warm hand rest upon his shoulder, while officers hurried him away from the radiant shore. Not a hand that burned, but a hand that purified. He declared that he visualized his existence flash before him, and every commitment, every hidden transgression, and subsequently heard a voice resounding within him, carried upon the distant murmur still ascending from the lake. You were forgiven by mercy. Do not waste what remains. Return to me. A woman standing behind a barricade near South Temple manifested that she perceived a hand touch her forehead, though no one stood close, and suddenly visualized a vision of the suffering of Christ, the thorns, the nails, the blood. Subsequently, a voice whispered, "This is my love for you now. Carry this love into the world." Others began to tremble as languages they had never learned flowed from their lips. Some wept without understanding. Why some visualized flashes of future things, warnings, assignments, consolations. Some perceived illnesses dissolve from their bodies. Some perceived chains within them break after years of silent slavery. And subsequently, tragically, some resisted, even touched by heaven, even moved by a luminosity. No human instrument could explain. A number hardened their hearts, turning unaltered. My friend, this is what happens when divinity crosses the veil. Revival for the humble, awakening for the seekers, and judgment for the inflexible existences. Remodeled hearts pierced eternity, transforming in real time upon a city that never anticipated being the stage of such an instant. Blessed be the Almighty. There exist some who will remain secure and intact, while the framework of nature dissolves around them, those blessed souls who choose the Almighty as their portion and Jesus as their Savior, and who in this planet so valiant sought a city that possesses foundations firm and unbreakable, will be protected beyond the reach of this widespread desolation. Their happiness lies secure in a kingdom that cannot be moved. Hebrews chapter 12 verse 28. There exists a new heaven and a new earth prepared for them. The earthquakes are the works of the Almighty, and only He brings this destruction upon the earth. That divinity is the author itself of earthquakes and transgression, the moral cause of earthquakes. Whatever the natural cause cannot be denied by those who believe the scriptures. The earthquakes are presented by the inspired writers as the proper judicial act of divinity for the punishment of transgression. He moves mountains without their knowing and overturns them in his wrath shakes the earth from its place and makes its columns tremble. Job chapter 9 verses 5 to 6. He looks upon the earth, and it trembles, touches the mountains, and they pour forth smoke. Psalm 104 verse 32. And then the earth shook and trembled, and the foundations of the mountains trembled. They were moved, because he burned with wrath. Psalm 18 verse 7. In his presence the mountains tremble, and the hills melt. The earth trembles, and its inhabitants are destroyed. Who can stand before his fierce wrath? Who can survive his burning fury? His rage shines like fire, and the mountains crumble into dust before his presence. Nahum chapter 1 verses 5 to 6. Transgression is the cause of divine wrath, the earthquakes, the effect of his wrath. I will bring disaster upon the planet, and their own iniquity upon the wicked. I will end the pride of the arrogant and humble the pride of the merciless. Therefore I will make the heavens tremble, and the earth will shake from its place before the wrath of the Almighty. In the day of his burning wrath, Isaiah chapter 13, verses 11 and 13. Look, the Almighty goes to devastate the earth and ruin it. He will ruin its surface and scatter its inhabitants. The earth is broken, the earth is split, the earth is completely shaken. Isaiah chapter 24, verses 1 and 19. And again, the Almighty will come with thunder and earthquake and great noise, with storm of wind and tempest and flames of devouring fire. Isaiah chapter 29, verse 6. Nothing can be more explicit than these scriptural testimonies that determine both the cause and the author of this terrible calamity. We cannot conceive that the universe had been perturbed by these furious disasters before transgression entered. Therefore, the reason, as well as the scriptures, assure us sufficiently that the earthquakes are works of divine judgment, the proper effect and punishment of transgression. Nothing can prove so impactful as this judgment delivered through an earthquake, when it arrives unexpectedly, like a thief in the night. When no time remains to flee, nor method to escape, nor possibility to resist. When no sanctuary nor refuge stands. When the earth opens suddenly and transforms into the tomb of entire families, villages, and cities. Whether by unleashing a flood of waters to drown them, or by vomiting flames of fire to consume them, or by closing over them. When parents and children, husbands and wives, and all people without distinction, in the midst of health and peace and daily occupations, become buried in a common ruin and pass together into the eternal world. And there exists only the difference of a few hours or minutes between a famous city and no city at all. Now, if war constitutes a terrible evil, then how much more an earthquake, which in the midst of peace brings an evil worse than the extremity of war? If a furious pestilence seems frightening that sweeps thousands in a day and tens of thousands in a night, if a consuming fire represents an astonishing judgment, then how much more astonishing becomes an earthquake by which houses and inhabitants, villages and cities and territories all become destroyed in one strike within mere minutes. For a person to feel the earth hanging over nothing like some vast sphere suspended in thin air. History informs us of the fearsome effects of earthquakes across all epochs, where one can visualize rocks torn into pieces, mountains not only toppled, but removed, hills lifted. Not only from valleys, but from seas. Fires erupting from waters, stones and ashes, expelled rivers, transformed seas, displaced earth, opening villages, swallowed. Among all divine judgments, none proves more horrible, more inescapable than an earthquake. Because where can we imagine escaping the danger if the most solid thing in the entire world shakes? With what horror do men remain struck when they hear the earth groan and feel it trembling beneath them? When houses loosen from their foundations, when roofs fall upon their heads, and the pavement sinks beneath their feet. In other calamities, some form of escape exists. But an earthquake encloses what it overthrows and wages war upon entire provinces, and sometimes leaves nothing behind to inform posterity of its outrages. More insolent than fire which respects rocks, more cruel than the conqueror who leaves walls, more greedy than the sea, which vomits, shipwrecks the earthquake, swallows, and devours everything it overthrows. Therefore fear the divinity, even that deity, who can in one moment cast both body and soul into hell. When the divinity makes the mountains tremble and shakes, the earth should not our hearts be moved. Should you not fear me, declares the Almighty, should you not tremble in my presence? Jeremiah chapter 5, verse 22. Will you not fear him who can open the windows of heaven above, or break the fountains of the abyss below, and pour complete floods of vengeance when it pleases him? Will you not fear him who can rain upon the wicked traps fire and sulfur and a horrible tempest? Psalm 11 verse 6. Will you not fear him who can ignite those earthquakes in the caverns of the earth and make them force their way toward the destruction of villages, cities, and territories? Will you not fear him who can thus suddenly convert a fruitful land into a sterile desert, a spectacle astonishing of desolation and ruin? Or that his fear might in this moment fall upon all who read these expressions, obliging each one of you to cry out, "My flesh trembles in fear of you, and I am afraid of your judgments." Psalm 119, verse 120. Or that all might visualize that his hand now lifts as in the act of striking it, remains extended still, and shakes its rod over a guilty land, a people prepared for destruction. The divinity never lacks forms and means to punish unrepentant transgressors. He possesses 1,000 other judgments in reserve. And if the earth does not open its mouth, still, you will surely in the end be swallowed in the bottomless pit of hell. Truly, it is a terrifying thing to fall into the hands of the living Almighty. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 31. If the earth right now were to open its mouth and swallow you, what would become of you? Where would you be? Those who flee terrified will fall into a trap, and those who escape the trap will step upon a snare. Destruction falls upon you from the heavens. The earth shakes beneath you. The earth has broken and has collapsed completely. All stands lost, abandoned, and confused. The earth staggers like a drunkard. It trembles like a tent in a storm. It falls and will not rise again because its transgressions prove too great. Isaiah chapter 24, verses 18 to 20. The works of creation and providence were undoubtedly destined for the warning and contemplation of humanity, especially when the divinity emerges from his place. That is, when he departs from the usual and established course of his providence to punish the inhabitants of the earth for their iniquities. Then it corresponds to us to observe the operation of his hands with fear and reverence. To this, the psalmist repeatedly calls us, "Come see the glorious works of the Almighty. See how he brings destruction upon the earth." Psalm 46, verse 8, "Come and see what the divinity has done, how astonishing his works on behalf of man." Psalm 66, verse 5. To assist you in this, I will gladly devote an hour today. This planet exists as a state of discipline for the eternal world, and therefore punishments of diverse types and degrees must be counted among the ordinary works of providence. Pain, illness, losses, plunder, disappointments. These constitute the usual scourges of the divine hand that our celestial Father employs each day to punish some or others of his straying children. But when these prove too weak and ineffective for their reformation, or when by being so frequent and common people begin to regard them as natural things and fail to recognize the divine hand in them, then the universal ruler departs from his usual methods of punishment and employs such designated and extraordinary executors of his vengeance as cannot but awaken a slumbering planet and render it sensible of his agency. In such moments, the divinity casts his world into fermentation and either suspends its established laws or brings to execution those which were formed solely for extraordinary occasions. The extraordinary executors of his vengeance generally comprise these four: 1 famine, 2 sword, 3 pestilence, 4 earthquakes. A famine in this land of abundance would constitute an unusual judgment, certainly. And yet diverse parts of our territory have been reduced to the edges of it by the severity of last year's drought. The sword has remained an inoffensive weapon for us until recently, but now it waves over our heads and pierces our territory in thousands. The pestilence represents a misfortune that has not spread desolation among us, though probably no year exists in which it does not walk through some territory or another upon our globe. As for earthquakes, we have experienced such shakings that can convince us we stand not beyond the reach of that desolating judgment, even in this solid continent, although they have not yet caused us any injury. But perhaps never since the earthquake in the deluge that broke the fountains of the great abyss has a desolation so extensive of this type occurred as has recently taken place in Europe and Africa. And although blessed be the divinity, it did not affect us immediately still. The fame itself of a judgment so frightening should be improved for our advantage. To this event, I can accommodate the expressions of my text. Those of you who have read the public newspapers need not be informed of that earthquake, which spread widely, which began the 1st of November, and since then has been felt at different moments through the majority of parts of Europe. For the benefit of those who have only received some imperfect indications of it, I would offer this brief history. Although much damage has not been done in those parts, still a strong warning has certainly been given. It would surely represent an instance of stupidity. It would be inexcusable for us not to take notice of such a frightening dispensation. Such devastations serve at once as judgments upon the places where they occur, and as warnings to others. For what purpose were the Israelites punished with so many miraculous judgments? Paul will tell you they happened not only for their transgressions, but all these things occurred as examples and were written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the world have arrived. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 11. For what purpose were the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah turned into ashes? Peter will tell you the divinity made them an example for those who afterward would live impiously, 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 6. And should we not consider such examples even in our own era? Others will perish for our admonition, and we will receive no profit from their destruction. This would be stupid and inexcusable, certainly. Therefore, my present design is to direct you toward such meditations as this alarming event naturally suggests, and that may prove sufficient for its proper improvement. Yet before entering this design, I would once more impress upon you a doctrine I have frequently proven before your audience, and that is, this planet is a small territory of Jehovah under the administration of his providence, and particularly that all blessings of existence are gifts of his generosity, while all its calamities are the punishments or judgments of his hand. This I would have you apply to the event now under consideration. There exists a set of presumptuous and clumsy philosophers arisen among us who think they refute all this by alleging that earthquakes proceed from natural causes, and therefore it is superstitious to ascribe them to the agency of providence. But there exists no more reason or philosophy in this than if they denied that a man writes because he uses a pen, or that kings exercise government because they employ servants under them. I grant that natural causes concur toward the production of earthquakes, but what are these natural causes? Are they independent causes that move by themselves? Were they not first formed, and are they not still directed by the divine hand? The briefest and simplest view I can offer of the case is this. When the divinity formed this globe, he visualized what would be the conduct of its inhabitants in all periods of time, and particularly knew at what particular moment a kingdom or city would stand ripe for his judgments and adjusted affairs accordingly. He established the train of events with such exactness that it would spring forth at the critical moment when all stood ripe for it. And thus, by a preconcerted plan, he answers all occasional demands of the world and adjusts to particular cases without a miraculous and direct work of his own hand. Or perhaps at times he may deem it necessary to work with his own immediate hand and suspend or counteract the usual and established laws of creation, so that his interference becomes more conspicuous. Let this truth, then, my friends, be placed deep in your minds as foundation that earthquakes are effects of divine providence and produced to answer some of his important ends in the world. And from here, I proceed naturally, according to promise, to direct you towards such meditations as are appropriate for this impacting event. Now you may take occasion from this to reflect upon the majesty and power divine, the frightfulness of divine wrath, the sinfulness of our planet, the distinguished goodness of providence toward us, the destruction of this globe in the final judgment. First, let the majestic and terrible phenomenon of earthquakes put in mind the majesty and power divine and the frightfulness of his displeasure. He can hurl and convulse this enormous globe and shake its foundations to the center. Trembling continents burning or sinking mountains wide, abysses yawning in solid ground. Explosions of subterranean mines sufficient to shatter a world are merely hints of his indignation. Yet my language only sinks this exalted theme. Therefore, I will give you the inimitable descriptions of the sacred writers. His wisdom is profound, his power is vast, who has resisted him and come out unscathed. He moves mountains without their knowing and overturns them in his wrath. He shakes the earth from its place and makes its columns tremble. He speaks to the sun and it does not shine. He seals the luminosity of the stars. Only he stretches the heavens and treads upon the waves of the sea. He is the maker of the Bear and Orion, the Pleiades, and the constellations of the south. He performs wonders that cannot be fathomed, miracles that cannot be counted. Job, chapter 9, verses 4 to 10. For a fire has been kindled by my wrath, one that burns to the lowest hell. I will heap calamities upon them and spend my arrows against them. Deuteronomy, chapter 32, verses 22 and 23. But the most impacting and vivid description, it seems to me, that the language of inspiration itself has given us stands in the prophecy of Nahum. The Almighty is a jealous and avenging being. The Almighty takes vengeance and is full of wrath. The Almighty takes vengeance on his enemies and maintains his wrath against his adversaries. The Almighty is slow to anger and great in power. The Almighty will not leave the guilty unpunished. His way is in the whirlwind, and the storm and clouds are the dust of his feet. The mountains tremble before him, and the hills melt. The earth trembles in his presence, the world, and all who live in it. Who can resist his indignation? Who can bear his fierce wrath? His wrath is poured out like fire, the rocks are shattered before him. Nahum chapter 1, verses 2 to 6. And this is the being who is scarcely thought of in our world. Is this he whose name passes for the lightest trifle, whose word can scarcely capture the attention of men, whose authority is ridiculed, whose wrath is despised, whose laws are boldly violated, whose threats are scorned? Is this he who is complimented with empty and spiritless formalities under the name of religion? Or is this he whom we are gathered this day to worship? What? And will there be no more attention and solemnity among us? Can anything be more unnatural, more impious, or more impacting? Certainly, Lord, it strikes me with horror to think how contemptuously this glorious, almighty, and astonishing being is treated in our world. Angels do not treat him thus. Not even demons in the height of their malice dare toy with him thus. They tremble before his name itself. Oh, why does the wicked man outrage the divinity? Why does he say to himself, "He will not call me to account"? Psalm 10, verse 13. Look, here is your antagonist. His wisdom is profound, his power is vast, who has resisted him and come out unscathed. Job, chapter 9, verse 4. This earth is as nothing in his hands. Surely the nations are as a drop in a bucket, they are counted as dust in the balances. He weighs the islands as if they were fine dust. Isaiah chapter 40, verse 15. He who can shake this enormous globe to the center. He who can bury proud cities with all their inhabitants in the bowels of the earth. He who can cast the ocean into fermentation and cause it to overwhelm the guilty land. He who can hurl the highest mountains from their eternal foundations into the sea, or sink them in valleys or pools of water, who has stored the bowels of the earth as with deposits of gunpowder, and can set it all ablaze or burst it into 10,000 fragments. He who can arm the most diminutive creature, a mosquito or a worm, to be your executor, and holds absolute power over the mightiest and most ungovernable elements, what will he make of you when they take you in hand? Can you rest tranquil for a moment while you have reason to fear that the supreme Lord of the universe is your adversary for your willful provocations? In his name, in his glorious and fearful name, does it carry any weight with you? I commend you to seek his favor. Make him your friend, and do not dare rebel against him further. Do you dare continue rebel against him, or careless about pleasing him while you walk upon his ground, while you breathe in his air, while you feed upon his provisions, while you live in his territories, and within the reach of his arm? Why can he cause that earth, which you contaminate with your transgressions, to open its frightful jaws and swallow you alive, like Korah and his company? Numbers chapter 16, verse 32. Oh, my friends, it can break our hearts to think that there should exist persons so mad as to incur his displeasure and remain careless about his favor, yet there are. Do not some such dwell among us? Very soon they will discover that it is a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living Almighty unless they repent quickly. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 31. Second, this desolating judgment can justly lead you to reflect upon the sinfulness of our world. Alas, we live upon a guilty globe, and much has it suffered for the transgressions of its inhabitants. Once it was entirely drowned in a universal deluge, and many parts of it have sunk since then beneath the burden of guilt. Had transgression never contaminated it, then never would it have been so torn and shattered. We have seen that these judgments stand at the disposal of divine providence, and we remain certain that a just providence would never inflict them unnecessarily. It is transgression, my friends, that forms the source of all calamities which oppress our world from epoch to epoch. It is transgression that has so frequently convulsed it with earthquakes. Only observe the language of my text upon this point. The earth shakes beneath you. The earth has broken and has collapsed completely. All stands lost, abandoned, and confused. The earth staggers like a drunkard. It trembles like a tent in a storm. It falls and will not rise again because its transgressions are very great. These, sirs, this is the burden beneath which it staggers. This is the evil before which it trembles. This is a burden that the earth itself, not that angels and all creation cannot bear. Why was the ancient world destroyed by a deluge? It was because all flesh had corrupted its way. The Almighty saw how great the wickedness of man had become upon the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil all the time. Why was Sodom consumed with lightning from heaven and sunk in a dead sea by an earthquake? It was because the men of Sodom were wicked and transgressors before the Almighty exceedingly. Genesis chapter 13, verse 13. In summary, transgression is the cause of all calamities beneath which our world has groaned from the fall of Adam until this day. The heavens have testified their displeasure against the transgressions of men through the most terrible judgments from epoch to epoch for nearly 6,000 years. The destruction of a nation stands destined not only for its punishment, but for a warning to others, so they may hear and fear. And none among you will do such an evil thing again. Deuteronomy chapter 13, verse 11. Yet men persist obstinately, still not alarmed by the strongest warnings and not reformed by the severest punishments. Let the sword of war slay its thousands. Let pestilence walk about in all its desolating terrors. Let the earth shake and tremble beneath its guilty inhabitants. Let these judgments repeat from generation to generation, from territory to territory, and still they will sin. And the punishments of 6,000 years have not been able to reform them. Oh, what a rebel province of the empire of Jehovah is this guilty globe, and probably it has rarely been more so than in the present epoch. And therefore, it is no wonder that divine judgments stand upon the earth. The greater part of it lies invaded with all the idolatry and ignorance, vice and barbarity of paganism. A great part worships the impostor Muhammad instead of the divine Son and groans beneath his yoke. The greater part of Europe stands corrupted with the idolatry, superstition, and licentiousness of the Church of Rome, and groans beneath its tyranny. There, the most foolish theatrical farces become devoutly performed under the name of religion. There, the mind-born free lies enslaved and dares not think for itself in matters wherein it must answer for itself. There, the homage due to the true divine being and the only mediator becomes sacrilegiously given to senseless idols and a crowd of imaginary saints. There, the infernal tribunal of the Inquisition imitates the tortures of hell and makes of the man who would discover truth a monument of misery. There, a market for indulgences and pardons stands sustained, and men for a little money can purchase a license to commit the most atrocious crimes, or make expiation for them through the penance of bodily austerities. And can pure and uncontaminated religion, can good morals grow and flourish in such soil? No. Religion has degenerated into priesthood and a mercenary superstition, and the most enormous vices and licentiousness must abound. Such was Lisbon by universal character. And though I would not repeat the censorious judgments of the Jews regarding the Galileans, Luke chapter 13 verse 2, nor suppose that Lisbon stood more deeply guilty than all the cities upon the face of the earth, still this I dare pronounce, that it was a very guilty place of the globe, and that it was for this that it became so severely punished. If we take a survey of Protestant territories where religion should stand found, if in any place, alas, how melancholy proves the panorama. The good ancient doctrines of the Reformation, which adapted themselves to advance the honors of divine grace and mortify the pride of man, have become too generally abandoned. And an easier system agreeable to the vanity and self-adulation of depraved hearts has dressed itself in their place. Not only has Christianity itself suffered rejection, ridicule, and exposure to public scorn by the growing club of deists, and where the name and Christian profession retain the life and spirit stand too generally lost, and their practice forms an open opposition to their professed faith. How stand the ordinances of the gospel neglected or profaned? What impacting variety of crimes must stand found everywhere, even in territories that profess to have renounced papal corruption, drunkenness, blasphemy, perjury, lying, fraud and injustice, pride, luxury, varied forms of lust, and every class of extravagances, and all these expressly forbidden under the severest penalties by that religion which they themselves profess and recognize as divine. Third, this melancholy event can lead your minds gratefully to reflect upon the peculiar divine goodness toward our territory, in that it became not involved in the same destruction. I need not tell you that we constitute a guilty and objectionable people. You can stand convinced of it through more authentic evidence. The existences of the generality proclaim it strongly. The terrors of war which now surround us proclaim it, and do not your own consciences whisper the same thing? And why have we been spared? How has even this solid continent borne up beneath the burden of guilt which burdens it? It has been due entirely to the grace and patience of that divinity who also stands little considered among us. And shall we not celebrate gratefully his praises? Will not his goodness lead us to repentance? Will all his kindness prove cast away upon us? Will we oblige him to pour out his judgments upon us also in the end? It seems to me I hear him expostulating over Virginia in that compassionate language. How shall I deliver you, Virginia? How can I let you go? How can I destroy you like Admah and Zeboim, cities that were destroyed with Sodom and Gomorrah? My heart stands torn within me. and my compassion overflows. Hosea chapter 11 verse 8. Oh, does nothing move us to melt at his feet in the most sincere repentance? Without a spirit of prophecy, I can pronounce with certainty that it will never stand well with our territory until we become brought to this. Fourth, that which I would suggest particularly to your thoughts from the devastations of the recent earthquake is the last universal destruction of our world in the final judgment. Of this, an earthquake stands both a confirmation to human reason as well as a vivid representation. One forms a confirmation even to human reason drawn from the constitution of our globe, that such destruction proves possible and even probable according to the course of nature. Our globe lies stored with subterranean deposits of combustible materials that require only a spark to produce a violent explosion and tear it apart and burst it into fragments. What enormous quantities of these sulfurous and nitrous mines must exist when a single discharge can spread a tremor across half the world, bury islands and cities, and shatter widely extended continents. What inexhaustible store of fire and sulfur has supplied Mount Etna, Mount Vesuvius, and other burning volcanoes that have been belching torrents of liquid fire for several thousand years and now rage as furiously as ever? Should only the subterranean deposits in every cavern and fissure of the globe catch flame, should the central fire merely release itself, should all combustible materials near or upon the surface of the earth become inflamed at once, peat, coal trees, cities, houses, and all their furnishings, this would produce a general conflagration that nothing could resist. In summary, we can conjecture from the construction of our world that it was not destined for perpetual existence in its present form, but to be dissolved by the frightful element of fire. And Revelation assures us of this universal desolation when the heavens will shrink like a scorched parchment and pass away with great noise, and the elements will melt with fervent heat, the earth also, and the things that are in it will be burned. 2 Peter chapter 3 verse 10. An earthquake also serves as a vivid representation of the universal ruins of that day and the horror and consternation of humanity. Let the imagination form a vivid idea of the destruction of Lisbon, the ground trembling and rising and roaring with subterranean thunders, towers, palaces, and churches staggering and falling, flames bursting from the ruins and setting everything ablaze, the sea roaring and rushing upon its shores with irresistible impetuosity, the inhabitants running from place to place in wild consternation in search of safety, or falling upon their knees and tearing the air with their wild cries and wailings, flying to the strongest buildings for refuge, but crushed in their ruins, or to the sea, and they're swept away by the rushing waves. Walls falling upon thousands in their flight, or the earth opening its jaws and swallowing them. Can human imagination represent anything more impactful? In other calamities, whatever else we lose, we still have the earth to support us. But when that disappears, we stand truly forsaken and must sink into immediate destruction. Such, my friends, yet infinitely more frightful, will prove the terrors of that universal earthquake, which we shall all witness. Stars fall, they plunge lawlessly through the air and crash against one another into pieces. The sun extinguishes and appears as an enormous globe of solid darkness. The moon turns to blood and reflects a portentous luminosity, the color of blood, upon the earth. The clouds flash and burn with sheets of lightning and become torn with a horrible crash of thunder. This echoes back from the subterranean thunders that murmur, rumble, and roar beneath the ground. The earth launches like a ball and bursts like a crumbling cloud. Visualize the yawning abysses, opening flames bursting from the center, and a horrible confusion of fire and smoke rolling across the arch of the sky. Visualize the works of nature and art perishing in a promiscuous ruin. Mountains sinking and exploding into so many volcanoes, vomiting seas of liquid fire. Rocks dissolving and pouring their melted mass into the channels of rivers. Pyramids, towers, palaces, cities, forests, and plains burning in one vast, indistinguishable flame. The seas evaporating and vanishing through the intensity of the heat. A mixed and confused heap of sea and land floods of water and torrents of melted rock. Now the earth turns upside down, inside out, and reduces to a gigantic chaos. And where will you, presumptuous and robust sinner, stand who can now despise the terrors of the Almighty? Oh, where will you flee in this tremendous day? What will support you when the ground upon which you stand disappears? What rock or mountain will you seek for refuge? When rocks and mountains sink and vanish or melt like snow before the sun, how can you expect to escape hell when the earth itself converts into a lake of fire and sulfur? Oh, how can you bear the thought of rolling and writhing there? What has now become of your lands and possessions upon which you once set your hearts? Nowhere stands the territory where the continent in which you once dwelt. Alas, they all reduce to ashes. Then, my friends, you will visualize the advantage of that despised and neglected thing, true religion, and the difference between the righteous and the wicked, between one who serves the Almighty and one who does not serve Him. Malachi chapter 3, verse 18. Then, those who now stand so out of fashion as to make religion a serious matter will then discover the happy fruits of those hours spent upon their knees at the throne of grace, of those cries and tears poured out after Jesus, of their honest struggles with transgression and temptation, and in summary of an existence dedicated to the divinity. Therefore, what of such among you, because I trust there exist such among you? Rejoice in the prospect of that glorious and frightful day, and let it become more and more your serious concern to prepare for it. You will rest eternally in a territory that will never suffer shaking by earthquakes, nor remain subject to any of the calamities of this mortal state. Therefore, since this will prove your portion, do not become greatly disturbed by any of the judgments that may befall this land of your pilgrimage and exile. The sooner it becomes destroyed, the sooner you will arrive home to the region of eternal rest. Borrow the language of the triumphant psalmist, and therefore we will not fear, even though earthquakes come, and the mountains crumble into the sea, though the oceans roar and foam, though the mountains tremble as the waters surge. Psalm 46, verses 2-3. But where will the ungodly and the sinner appear? Or where will some of you, my beloved people, appear in that frightful day? I feel a godly jealousy over you, and truly I fear for some of you. You know in your own consciences that you remain generally thoughtless and careless about the great concerns of your eternal state. Your hearts have never been fully changed by divine grace, nor do you know by experience what it means to believe, to repent, and to love the divinity with all your hearts. You make no conscience of every duty. I mean, you neglect divine worship in your families, though under the strongest obligations to perform it, perhaps from your own solemn vows and promises. You indulge in some known transgression or another, and feel some pangs of repentance. Yet your repentance does not result in reformation. Alas, my friends, is this the character of any soul within the hearing of my voice? Then I must tell you that if they continue such, they will become fuel for the last universal fire, and must perish in the ruins of the world they have loved. Yet who knows that if they begin immediately, they may still have time enough to work out their salvation. Therefore now begin the work. There exists no security except in Jesus Christ. Flee toward Him, therefore. Permit me to lay the hand of friendly violence upon you and hurry you out of your present condition, as the angel did with Lot out of Sodoma. Arise, depart from this frightful condition, because the Almighty will destroy all who continue in it. Escape for your life. Do not look back. Escape toward Jesus Christ, lest you become consumed. Genesis chapter 19, verse 14. I must tell you frankly, I studied this part of my discourse with an anxious heart and almost despaired of adding this exhortation to it, because I thought I have given such exhortations again and again, yet they seem generally in vain. There exists certainly a happy number among my hearers who I do not doubt have considered the gospel preached by my lips. But as for the rest, I have become so frequently disappointed that now I scarcely expect to prevail over these. My dear friends, These are my discouragements in my private retreats, when no eye beholds me except the divinity. And oh, sinners, your future conduct will prove that there was good reason for my fears. Alas, is the ministry of the gospel an useless institution with respect to you. Do not such exhortations as these carry weight with you? Will you resist my benevolent hand when I extend it to snatch you from the burning? Well, my friends, I cannot help it if you perish, if you stand obstinately decided upon it. I have only this to manifest, that your poor minister will weep in secret for you, and will let his tears fall upon you as you fall into ruin from between his hands. Yes, sinners, may the divinity not permit that I cease praying for you and pitying you while my tongue remains capable of pronouncing an expression. And think it worthwhile to listen to me. I will send the calls of the gospel after you. And if you perish after all, you will fall within hell with the offers of heaven in your ears. Gladly I would cleanse myself and manifest your blood be upon your own heads. I am clean. Acts chapter 18 verse 6. But alas, my heart recoils and fails. I have no doubt whatever, except that the gospel I have preached to you is certainly the gospel of Christ, and gladly I venture my own soul upon it. But in dispensing it among you, I am conscious of so much weakness, coldness, and inability that sometimes I stand impacted by myself, lest I become accessory to your ruin. Yet this is certain, great guilt will fall somewhere. I desire to take my own portion of shame and guilt upon myself, and humble myself for it before the divinity. And I ask you do the same. Oh, humble yourselves before the divinity for your past conduct, and prepare yourselves to meet him amid a world ablaze. If you continue obstinately impenitent, prepare yourselves to make your defense against your poor minister there, when he will stand obliged to appear as a swift witness against you and manifest that he warned you to prepare for this day. Though with so many guilty infirmities, as nothing except your mercies can forgive. But you did not consider my warnings, though given in your solemn hearing, and sometimes reinforced with my own compassionate tears. There, Lord, in the supreme tribunal, prepare yourselves to meet me. And there I dare appeal to the truth and importance of the things I have inculcated upon you. Something devastating has just unfolded in the heart of America. A nation once acclaimed as the beacon of autonomy and truthfulness now must face brutal truths about a society battling to remain cohesive. The very foundations of society stand shaken, leaving scars waves not only in communities, but in the spirit of the nation itself. Throughout the past 48 hours, while headlines saturated screens with handshakes, protocol smiles, or winter snow, a massive movement born not only from fractured existences, but from fragmented reality began to form in Salt Lake City. This was no random collapse. These were the warnings that Jesus marked more than 2,000 years ago. It was more than a singular disaster. It was profoundly prophetic. It is divine providence who has impregnated the bowels of the earth with these frightful materials that tear and shatter its framework. It is his providence that strikes the spark which ignites this terrible train in flames and causes the terrible explosion. All stands lost, abandoned, and confused. The earth staggers like a drunkard, it trembles like a tent in a storm. And the reason for all is because its transgressions are very great. And there exists no security in this shipwreck of nature. All humanity stands involved in this general ruin. Superficially, the current conflicts of the world appear as little more than routine geopolitical maneuvers. But visualized through the lens of biblical prophecy, the atmosphere changes. What appears political becomes profoundly spiritual. What seems coincidental begins to look coordinated. And suddenly we realize that we may stand within one of the most consequential seasons that our generation has ever lived. We do not witness simply scattered disputes or temporary diplomatic tensions. What unfolds reflects ancient patterns, shadows first described in Scripture, now taking form in real time. And here lies the point that almost all are missing. The signs pointing toward the return of Jesus are no longer distant silhouettes. They materialize as concrete realities, events visible for whoever possesses eyes sharpened by discernment. The scripture never presents the final season as a blur. It communicates in markers specific signals. And right now, those signals converge with a speed that feels unprecedented. Jesus declared in Matthew 24, verse 35, that heaven and earth may pass, but his expressions will never fade, meaning that the signs he described were not possibilities. They were certainties, inevitabilities, that would arrive exactly as predicted. One of the fundamental signs he gave was the lesson of the fig tree, an apparently simple representation, but one that carried centuries of meaning in Hebrew tradition. The fig tree symbolized Israel rooted, preserved, cultivated by the divinity itself. Therefore, when Jesus pointed toward it, he offered no poetic illustration, he unlocked a prophetic code. When Israel returned to existence after being scattered among the nations, the prophetic clock would begin, and Israel returned against all historical expectation after nearly 2,000 years in exile. A nation resurrected, a language revived, a culture restored, a people regrouped. That moment, foretold by Isaiah, was the first great sign, a visible marker destined to awaken a slumbering planet. But that was only the beginning. This global fixation is no coincidence. It is convergence. And this convergence, despite how dramatic it appears, remains only the first sign. Because while Israel remains in its prophetic place, something substantially more sobering unfolds silently, powerfully, and much closer to home. A second sign advances, not overseas, not in distant borders, but here within the heart of the United States. The restoration of Israel marked the beginning of the countdown. But the shaking now touching United States soil carries the weight of what proceeds in the prophetic sequence. It is no longer merely a global panorama being prepared. It is a nation once judged stable, protected, impregnable, now experiencing the vibrations the sacred texts declared would spread through all nations as the epoch draws near its culmination. And this second sign is not technological progress. It is not political turbulence. It is not cultural fragmentation, though all these participate. It is something deeper, more disruptive, and substantially more spiritually significant. It is the kind of sign that forces an entire nation to look inward. The kind that exposes fractures long ignored. The kind that does not emerge from foreign wars, but from within its own borders. And what has just happened in America could well be the clearest expression of this second sign we have yet visualized. Before stepping into the details that communicate on their own, you need to grasp the full weight of the moment. If the first sign was the budding of the fig tree, the gathering of Israel, the convulsion of Jerusalem, then the second sign is the impact now rippling through our own soil. A sign not of beginnings, but of acceleration. Not of distant prophecy, but of present reality. Not of some other place, but of here. And when you visualize what has unfolded, you will understand why so many have begun to whisper the same question. Has the second prophetic marker just erupted upon American soil? What emerged in Utah did not fit the usual pattern. It was not another noisy argument on a screen or a fresh surge of cultural confusion. It was something you could not simply brush aside. An interruption that pressed itself into the physical world. The people perceived it before they could comprehend it. An instant when the quiet shattered. When the ordinary rhythm of a winter day was pierced by something foretold from ancient times. And as reports dripped out, scattered, uncertain, almost hesitant, you could detect a deeper current running beneath.